Mrs. Thunder, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Coghill. Here. Mr. Campiani.
Here.
Mr. Johnson is absent. Mr. Knicker. Here. Mr. Froman.
Here.
Mrs. Swanson.
Here.
Mrs. Intihar.
Here. Mr. Harrison, will you lead us in the pledge?
Yes, would you please stand to the south end of our, or north end of our building? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome everyone to Hawthorne School. Our first item on the agenda is communications with the host school. Mr. Pence.
Board of Education members, welcome to Hawthorne School. It is with mixed emotion that I address you this evening, as this is the last time I will host the Board of Education meeting as an administrator in District 200. We are the Hawthorne Hawks, and we are known as the little school with a big heart. Part of our heart comes from our staff, and I would ask them to stand and be recognized this evening. It's been a very busy month as we concluded parent-teacher conferences last night. Staff. Another piece of our heart is our supportive parents. They are actively involved in all facets of our school, and I would like to thank them for their hospitality tonight. I have two items to share with you this evening. The first being a literacy project that our PTA initiated this year. Outside door one of our school, you will notice a small white schoolhouse with the heart of Hawthorne showing. This small box is the Hawthorne Little Free Library. The Little Free Library concept had its beginnings in Hudson, Wisconsin, as a way to slow down traffic near the St. Croix River. What started out as a way to trade and share books and have discussions about them is now worldwide. You may have seen a number of them, these small freestanding libraries. The purpose is to promote literacy and the love of reading, build a sense of community, and to build libraries around the world. 2,510 to be exact. And our PTA has added one more. Mr. Chuck Harper, the grandfather of third grader Matthew Harper, built our Hawthorne Little Free Library. What makes our library so special is this is our PTA's gift to our retiring Library Learning Center director, Mrs. Carol Schoen. Yesterday, to Mrs. Schoen's surprise, the PTA dedicated the library to her. Students, staff, and parents wrote messages on special bookmarks as part of this dedication. So tonight, before you leave, please check out, well, actually you don't have to check out the book. You can just take it or leave one. Please take a look at our Hawthorne Little Free Library, our PTA's way to extend their heart to those who might not be able to secure books for their homes. It's also eco-friendly, as it keeps books out of our landfills. Thank you, PTA, for supporting literacy and dedicating our library to an important part in our building, Mrs. Carol Schoen. Secondly, Mr. Al Beatrice, Mr. Kurt Wallace, Mrs. Kathleen Cruz, Mrs. Marie Slater, Mr. Rick Martin, Mr. Jack Rogan, Mr. John Ebright. 20 years ago, I stood before this District 200 Board of Education at a similar meeting as we have tonight. These former school board members had formidable tasks at hand. Changes in curriculum, increasing enrollment, facility upgrades were issued 20 years ago, and yet many of these same topics are being discussed this evening. The work of a school board member often goes unnoticed and underappreciated, but all of you give yourselves to the betterment of our students and our community. Tomorrow, we will observe Illinois School Board Member Appreciation Day. It is a day in which we can acknowledge the work that all of you do. I hope the letters from some of our 5th grade students, another piece of the heart of Hawthorne, help to express their appreciation of your work. Thank you, District 200 School Board members, for taking on the challenges of public education. And finally, it has been my privilege and honor to have served as principal of Pleasant Hill and Hawthorne Elementary Schools. While many things have changed over the past 20 years, one thing has not changed, and that is the commitment and dedication of those who sit behind me. Active parents, enthusiastic students, and especially the talents and the spirit of the teaching staff and their commitment to students that keeps District 200 classrooms, thriving learning environments, and a school district that is second to none. I am proud of the work that has been accomplished here at Hawthorne School, and I have been fortunate to call Hawthorne School my family for the past 13 years. It has always been my pledge to this community to provide a great learning experience for the children of Hawthorne School. It is and always will be a little school with a big heart. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patterson. We love coming here. Are there any modifications to the agenda? Okay, recognitions and achievements. Dr. Harris.
Thank you, Mrs. Intihar, and good evening, board and community. We do have one special recognition this evening, and at this time, I would like to call up Patty Clausing and her daughter Keisha up to the podium here. We have a very special recognition this evening. Keisha is the honoree this evening, and Keisha was the state champion from Wheaton Warrenville South in girls tennis. And it's to my knowledge that this is the first state champion in tennis, boys or girls, in District 200 ever, either school, any school, since tennis has been a sport in IHSA. So congratulations. I'm sure you want to comment briefly a little bit about the event and how the journey to get to that championship match.
Well, first of all, thank you all for honoring Keisha tonight. Obviously, her mom also, and being her coach, I want to talk as a coach especially because watching an athlete fight through a tournament, any coach, especially individual sports, I know wrestling, tennis, golf, and all those kinds of sports are individual. You see the kids just fight for themselves out there on their own, and watching the school and the community. And I've been a part of District 200 in Central and Wheaton South since 1989, and probably in a handful of elite athletes, Keisha belongs with some of the best athletes that we've ever seen. And to watch the hard work come through and pay off and have the support of her team, which is great in tennis being indoor sport. The whole team was there, as well as our administration. We're a minor sport, but to see Mr. Healy and Mr. Claypool support her throughout the whole tournament and be there and cheer her on right to the end. Tennis matches are long, so they stayed the whole day, and the team, it was just great support. And like any observer of athletics, when you see somebody fight and work and have the joy of winning on top of it all, it was a special day for all of us.
Well, I know, Coach, it's always special to have a state champion, but especially when it's your daughter, that's even more unique. So, congratulations.
And I would just like to say thank you so much for honoring me. It really means a lot to me. I had a great support state, Mr. Claypool, who's my principal, Mr. Healy, who's the athletic director, and my team, of course, my mom, the coach, and but thank you so much for this honor. It really means a lot to me, so thank you very much.
Thank you again, Keisha, for coming this evening, and Coach Clausing. As I've said before, we only honor at the board level here state champions, and it is a very unique, and as I had said previously, the first and only at this point state champion in tennis, boys or girls, for any of our high schools in the history of District 200. So congratulations. Thank you. That concludes recognitions and achievements this evening.
Public comments on agenda items. Okay. Then the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Intihar. This evening, I want to cover a few events that's been going on in the district, as well as a couple other pieces of information this evening for board members. First of all, this past Friday and Monday in District 200 was the commemoration of Veterans Day. District 200 has chosen in the past several years to have school on November 11th. However, this school year, it was on Sunday. So schools across the district chose to continue those unique remembrances and celebrations on Friday, and then some did it on Monday because it fell over a weekend. Each school scheduled accordingly depending on the availability of their guests and so on. Myself, and I know many board members, attended each of the schools and saw several of the events across the district. I'll tell you a little bit about my journey last Friday. I had the opportunity first thing in the morning to go to Hubble and attended a 6th grade assembly where two active soldiers, active in the reserves I should say, talked about their combat times and the experiences of being a veteran of war. And I think it was, again, very appropriate for middle school level children. Then I went to Washington and saw a wonderful assembly at Washington. The students sang several songs, had presentations of a lot of their grandfathers and a couple aunts and uncles I know and friends that were honored. They got to introduce themselves and talk about their service time in the military, so that's always a special day at that level. And then after that, I visited Wheaton North and had the opportunity to chat over lunch with several of the guest veterans. They were in the social studies classrooms that day at Wheaton North and had the opportunities to visit with students directly about their experiences and answer questions. Over lunch, it was nice to have conversations with several of the veterans at that time. And then in the afternoon, we had a very special event, and I know many of the board members were there, a dedication of a bench on behalf of the board and the district administration to Johnson Elementary School in memory of Cliff Johnson, who had passed away most recently, the namesake of the school, and his family was there, and it was a very nice celebration, not only of his service and his namesake and his passing, but also the service of all the veterans there in the Warrenville community that visited the school that afternoon. So it was a full day. And I know we had several other events also on Monday in several of our schools across the district, and wanted to just continue to remember how important it is to have school on that November 11th. And you see our calendar this evening and part of our consent agenda does have Veterans Day continues to be on our calendar for next school year, and we will continue to process the educational component. One other note this week, and actually the day is tomorrow, which is Board of Education Appreciation Day, established by the state of Illinois. And some of you attended a city council meeting last week where the city of Wheaton proclaimed tomorrow, Thursday, November 15, Board of Education Day in the city of Wheaton, and commemorated your service and your continued efforts. The governor's office in the state of Illinois also sent out a proclamation here and said that November 15th is School Board Members Day in Illinois. Everyday children and communities benefit from the dedication and commitment to public education demonstrated by locally elected school board members. So I congratulate each and every one of you on behalf of Governor Quinn, Mayor Gresk, and I know so all of community members for your continued service and dedication for the better education of students in our community. So thank you all. It is a special day, and once a year it's okay to have a pat on the back for your time and effort. So, and it happens more than that, but at least one day a year it's very special. So thank you. Two other pieces of information. In your green folders this evening, you will have a copy of the levy presentation that was given at the Finance Committee meeting a week or so ago. And I know Mr. Gambiani and Mrs. Swanson were there, and we'll give an update on committee reports tonight.
It's a preview of the levy action that we will be bringing forward at the December board meeting. And also you'll see a report from Dr. Rossetti from the DuPage County Regional Education Office and talking about the work that's going on at the county level in K-12 public education. So I encourage you to look through that document and see how the regional office supports District 200 as well. And finally, I just want to say happy Thanksgiving, not only to members of the board, the community, people here this evening. I will share that it is my favorite holiday, bar none. It is I believe it's the best holiday of the year in our country. I love to eat, be with family, and watch football. And that's good for me personally, and I love that day. So I do believe we have a lot to be thankful for. Just always want to don't pass that opportunity up to say happy Thanksgiving to each of you and the community as well. So that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Harris, and happy Thanksgiving to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we're now at the point where we have our consent agenda, and we have a number of items on that consent agenda. I'll go through them. The first is acceptance of a gift to Emerson Elementary School, acceptance of a gift to Lowell Elementary School, approval of the biennial review of the bullying policy, approval to post the math curriculum, approval of the 2013-2014 district calendar, approval of bills payable and payroll, approval of minutes, October 9th special meeting, October 10th, open and closed, October 12th, special meeting, October 24th, community of the whole, and approval to destroy recordings of closed sessions prior to June 2011 as allowable by law, and approval of the personnel and supplemental personnel report. Are there any items board members wish to remove from the consent agenda? If not, then may I have a motion to approve, please?
Second.
Moved by, okay, now the mouse doesn't want to. Moved by Mr. Broman, seconded by Mr. Knicker. Any discussion? Hearing
Yeah,
none.
we'll be after, you're going to hear one. The gifts to the schools, it's just important enough to thank those that participated in that, whether it's a gift of a violin, which one of these was a personal instrument, no doubt, of one of the families that donated it back to Emerson School. And then secondly, to Lowell, where Target has its program to reimburse people for their shopping at Target stores and so on and so forth. At this morning's PTA, I grabbed as many of the PTA, not literally, I spoke with as many PTA people as I could, thanking them for their continued efforts. And having been on the other side where my wife and I have run Market Day and have run the sale of magazines and or wrapping paper, it's a lot of hard work and a lot of effort goes into that, and that money gets funneled directly right back into the schools. So as many as I contacted this morning at that brief breakfast, thank them for that, and thank these other donors tonight for these two gifts that we continuously see coming back to our schools. And it's important that it goes right back to the kids and the young students who's now going to have a violin to play. It was just remarkable to see that one was donated. So again, just thank you to those people who contributed to that, and again, Target stores for having that program giving back to the schools as well.
Yeah, just one other comment. Among the consent agenda items was the approval to post the math curriculum as part of our effort to implement the core curriculum. And I just would encourage those in our districts, particularly those who are parents of students in kindergarten through 7th grade, to take a look at the proposed math curriculum. I was encouraged to hear that a large part of this curriculum, particularly that focuses on algebra, actually exceeds the core curriculum because we're trying to be aggressive in our approach to algebra. And I was pleased to hear that. So I'm encouraged, as I said, all those in the district, particularly parents, to look at that posting and give us comments and feedback.
Absolutely. Any other comments? Mr. Kirk? Oh, but Joanna. Any other comments? Okay, then we'll call for the vote.
Mr. Groman,
Yes.
Mr. Knicker,
Yes.
Mrs. Swanson,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani,
Yes.
Mrs. Coghill,
Yes.
Mrs. Engelhardt.
Yes.
Motion passes. We have a joint vote online.
I'm not getting a voting screen, and I tried refreshing and rejoining, and it's still not coming up.
Okay, let me see if I can get a little former. Go ahead, Mrs. Engelhardt, and I will work on it. All right.
We have one action item on our agenda tonight, and that is acceptance of the 2011-2012 audit prepared by Baker Tilly Rochelle Kraus. And Dr. Harris, would you, what I was thinking we would do is before we have a motion, have a presentation. Are we having a presentation?
Yes.
Are we? Okay, just so that everybody is then clear on what we're moving. I thought maybe we should have a presentation first. Do you have a motion? Okay, well then I'd like to have a motion for acceptance of the audit.
So moved.
Joanne, moved by Joanne.
Second.
Second by Mr. Knicker. And now discussion and presentation. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Intar and board members. This evening, we do have our audit firm here this evening to give an update on the 2011-12 school year. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Farley for some brief comments, and then he'll turn it over to Jason.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Annually, the board is asked to accept an independent audit. The board is contracted with Baker Tilly Virchow Kraus to perform that audit. It's quite a long process. They come into the business office in spring and finish up by the end of August. Off and on, they're here during that time period. It's been the 11-12 school year was an interesting year. You often hear me complain about the state of the state and their pain of finances, funds to the school district. We did have a large payment come from the state this year that was 9 years in the making, back to the 2003 high school referendum. We did last year at this time, we talked during budget time about the possibility of those proceeds finally coming in. We did not budget for it, but they did come in. It did afford us the opportunity to pay off our technology lease, which was something different as well. So tonight we're, without going into too much more detail, let Jason do it as it's his report, but let Jason Coyle from Baker Tilly Virchow Kraus walk through the audit with the Board of Education. Mr. Gambiani will, at the point of board reports, speak a little bit too about the Finance Committee. We brought the audit through the Finance Committee first, and then got it to the board to review, and Jason will now walk us through it, and then we will ask the board to officially accept the audit. So that, Jason?
You stole the best points there. That's fine. Maybe to start off, it was a pleasure. I'm not sure if this is working or not. I'm sure what else to do that. Closer to it. Anyway, it's a pleasure to work with the business office as it is every year that we're here. As Bill was alluding to, we're here for a fair amount of time, and we ask for a lot of information, and we ask a lot of questions on all that information that we ask for, and so we just appreciate their help in helping us get the audit done. They do a great job of making it as painless as possible for us and for them. You should have a couple documents in front of you that I'll walk through very briefly. If you have questions, you can either wait till the end and ask them, or shout them out as I go, whatever works for you. First, I'm going to go through the larger document, which is your financial statements as of the end of June 30th, 2012. Starting on page 1 of these financial statements is our audit opinion. So this is page 1, page 2, the only thing that comes from my firm. Everything else in here is the financial information of the district. And the opinion hasn't changed from last year. It continues to be what we call unqualified or also clean audit opinion. It's the highest level of assurance that we can give. It means everything in here is stated fairly in all material respects. The tab right after that is labeled MD&A, which stands for the Management's Discussion and Analysis. If you don't read anything else in these financial statements, I'd encourage you to spend a few minutes going through the MD&A. It kind of summarizes what happened during the year in kind of plain English in a narrative format. In here, there are some pie charts on page 7. At the top is where your money is coming from. And you can see 67% of the revenue this year came in the form of taxes. That's down from where it was last year, but that's skewed a little bit because of what Bill was talking about with the large payment that came in from the state this year. So obviously the state funding percentage was up this year due to the capital grant proceeds that you received. On the bottom, the pie chart is where your money is going. So the expenses that are flowing out of the district, what are the purposes of those? You can see, as we would expect, that in a school district, a large percentage of your expenditures are for instruction and other people's services. Your overhead, if you will, or your administration and business continues to be relatively low at 8% and hasn't changed from last year, so you continue to keep those administrative costs level. We'll go past the tab called Basic Financial Statements, starting on page 10, to kind of get into the heart of your financial statements here. This statement here is kind of where we take all the funds of the district and we collapse it together, and we add on your capital assets, so all your investments in your buildings and your equipment, and we also add in all the long-term liabilities, all the bonds and leases that the district has. And you can see at the bottom the net assets, so what's left over is about $70 million at the end of the year, of which $20 million approximately is unrestricted. So obviously some of it's restricted because it's in the form of buildings, which you can't sell or don't normally sell. You did sell Hubble recently, but on a regular basis you're not selling those. So you have about $20 million at the end of the year in unrestricted net assets. If you flip the page right over, this is what we call your statement of activities. And the only thing I'll point out here really is you can see that that grant from the state of the $14.5 million in that capital grants and contributions column kind of stands out there a little bit, and kind of obvious what occurred during the year. And so the change in net assets, so the increase in your net assets for the year was about $12.5 million there on the bottom corner. If you flip to the next page, this is your balance sheets. These are kind of the funds that you're used to seeing on a regular basis. You might recall that last year, the presentation changed a little bit. Your education fund and your working cash fund are now collapsed together under what we call the general fund. I think the big thing to point out here is in your operations and maintenance fund, you'll see $11.6 million is what we label assigned fund balance. That's the money that's left over now from the proceeds from the capital grant after, as Bill mentioned, you pay back part of the lease. So that's the amount that's left over there. If you flip a couple more pages to pages 15 and 16, this is your income statement of all the funds. At the top is the revenue, so the money coming into the district. In the middle there are your expenditures, so the money that's going out. As we just mentioned, the capital grant from the state came into your operations and maintenance fund. So your operations and maintenance fund balance went up quite substantially during the year, up to $12.7 million from $1.2 million. Your general fund basically broke even, had a slight increase in your fund balance, and your transportation fund, the fund balance decreased a little bit there, in part due to the delay in the state funding. A couple more places that I'll point out to you. Looking back further in the financial statements on page 60, as I mentioned, the general fund now is the education fund and the working cash fund. So on page 60, we broke those out so you can still see that detail. And your main operating fund, being your educational fund, increased its fund balance almost $2 million this year. So it's still in a slight deficit position, but very, very minor deficit position of about $87,000. So definitely in the direction we'd like to see things going, particularly with that fund having been in a deficit position. And then the remainder of that fund balance is obviously your working cash funds. I won't point out anything further in the financial statements unless you had any particular questions. Otherwise, I'll move to the smaller document that you have in front of you. The other document then is what we are required to communicate every year from the auditor to management and to the board. Over the years, we've had to communicate certain items, and management has done a very good job of taking those to heart and improving their operations, improving the internal controls. And now we just have a couple of things that we're required to communicate, really related to the fact that we assist in compiling and putting together this financial statement for the district, which is a very, very common thing in most governments that we audit, and definitely in school districts, for the auditor to come in and assist in the compilation of the audit report. So that's really the only thing that we were required to communicate to you in this document. I think the other thing of note here, we do talk about future accounting pronouncements that are coming out. There's the one that's a few years down the road that you might have caught wind of. It relates to pensions. Coming up in a few years, any of your unfunded pension liabilities, so amounts that you owe to the pension funds, will now be recorded as a liability on the district's financial statements. Not in the funds, but in the entity-wide statements where we show all the assets and the liability of the district. So that's going to be quite a big change. IMRF and TRS being the two major pensions that the district is involved with. And we really don't know what the liability is right now with TRS. That's going to be a big question, and depends on what decisions the state makes down the road as to really what your ultimate liability is for that pension fund. So we have a few years before that happens, but I just wanted to make you aware that there will be some increased liabilities that will be shown on your financial statements in the future years. You won't be alone though. This will affect all school districts, all municipalities, all counties, all states within the United States. So you'll be going through it together.
I just want to jump on that comment real quick there. Jason pointed out to board members, he is talking about pending legislative changes in Springfield that I know we all will be watching extremely closely after the first of the year. I know Speaker Madigan has called special session, and we do anticipate some type of pension change. So I think that's the best way to put it at this point. It's hard to speculate other than, obviously the things that we have to prepare for. And as we continue to look at our fund balances and our operating funds, is some type of pension obligation is probably heading our way. It's just a matter of how much and when is my guess. We'll know more after the first of the year, but it is something we have to continue to prepare for to make sure the district does not get into a poor cash situation. If there's any questions or comments on that, I just want to clarify that. It's a big deal.
It is a big deal. Very big deal. Any questions I can answer?
Actually, just one question. Sure. In your smaller report here, you identify what you call, and I put quotes around this material, those quote weaknesses.
Right.
I understand your comment about the external financial reporting, and that this would be a financial burden for any district to have an external auditor on staff all the time.
Yeah, somebody with the skills and knowledge.
Right. What I want to focus on, though, is your suggestion or your comment on the capital asset tracking. Here, the account for capital assets and related depreciation at your end with your assistance.
Correct.
And then you go on to say that we believe that maintaining a current complete list of capital asset cards against net asset misappropriation and material misstatements of the financial statement. What specifically are auditors concerned about with respect to misappropriation and material misstatements with respect to capital assets?
Well, we show all your capital assets on your financial statements, and so that's really where it comes into play. They're not in the fund financial statements, they're not in the financial statements you see on a regular basis from the administration. But they do go into the audit at the end of the year and show all the capital assets. So the district has routinely outsourced compiling all the capital assets to us, and so we're nonetheless required to communicate that to you, that was outsourced to us, and so that's why this comment is in here. If the district hadn't outsourced it to us and wasn't maintaining it internally, then when we came in to do the audit, we wouldn't have a complete record that was up to date of all your capital assets, and we wouldn't have anything to audit, if you will, then when it came to the value of your capital assets at the end of the year. And so that's what we're getting at. If the district isn't doing it internally or wasn't outsourcing it us, then we wouldn't have anything and we would be able to audit it.
So that would entail the retention of an appraiser to appraise all of the capital.
There's various different ways to go about doing it. Getting an appraisal is a start, and the district has had that at one point. But then every year as you purchase equipment that meets your capitalization threshold or you make improvements to your buildings, you would be tracking that on a regular basis and then depreciating it as well. And then I know we talked to the administration about this, the bill in the business office, and they looked at the cost benefit analysis of it and just determined that it was the most cost effective is to have us assist in hiring
Specifically, I just don't understand what are the risks of misappropriation of material mistakes for basically either capital assets or roll stock.
Well, I mean, if you made some major improvements to your buildings, for example, during the year, and the capital asset list never got updated, then the numbers we could be presenting in your financial statements wouldn't have that investment back into your buildings represented, which obviously you would want to have improvements in your buildings representing your financial statements. But if a list wasn't being maintained and we weren't being engaged to maintain them, we wouldn't necessarily know what that accurate number should be.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. All right, so is it, if there are no other comments, then we'll call for the vote.
Mrs. Coghill?
Yes.
Mr. Knicker?
Yes.
Mrs. Swanson?
Yes.
Mr. Gaviani?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes, with kudos to Mr. Farley.
Mrs. Intihar?
Yes. Okay, now we're ready for, I think what a lot of you have come to hear about, and that's a report on the Jefferson Facilities Capital Development Community Survey.
Hey, thank you, Mrs. Intihar. As the board recalls, back in August, the board had decided to go out and get some community feedback, and we did that in two different ways. One was to have community forums at Jefferson Early Childhood Center to get some feedback on some proposals we had looked at on the replacement of that facility and also some of our other capital development needs in the district. We did host each of those forums and had a report on that back in September. We also chose to go out and hire a firm to complete a community survey. And tonight we are going to provide the results from that survey. And at this time I'd like to introduce Dr. John Gatta, who is from ECRA, is here this evening to run through the report. Now, I won't comment yet because I don't want to steal any of his thunder here. I know there's quite a bit of detailed information here, and he's going to share the details of that survey. Mr. Gatta.
Great, thanks. It's great to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to come address the board as to the results of this survey. What I'm going to do, all of you have in front of you a detailed report as to the methodology and everything that went into the survey, and much more detailed analysis that I'm going to go through here tonight. I want to make sure that I hit the high points, and I want to make sure that I stress to the board when you engage in these kinds of surveys, there's a whole lot of analysis that you begin to decode.
Maybe suggest you're very close to test.
There's a lot of analysis within the report that you can begin to drill down to and begin to extrapolate what it represents and what it means, but I just urge you to take it holistically, synthesize the collective pieces of data that are represented in the report and really try to extract out of that the key messages, and that's really what I'm going to go through tonight. What does it all sum to? What's the gestalt of all of it? Because that's why you did this survey. As the board looks to options for how to renovate the Jefferson facility, it was very prudent and very wise to go out and ask the community as to what are their values and what are the kinds of things that they would like to see considered in that kind of project. And I think there's some really good information here. And so so that's what I plan to go through right now, so.
Just to point your board members, you do have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation too in your green folders there if you'd like to follow along, and also a copy of the report as well.
Okay? Okay, very good. So what you see on the screen now is the number of surveys and the number of voices that came back through this survey effort. And one of the things that you should take comfort in is that this survey is a compilation of over 1,000 community members as to their thoughts and feelings on the issues that were presented in this survey. The survey process went out as part of the district mailing, and it was done accordingly to try to minimize the cost of the districts as to try to reach out and market the survey to really get as many participants as possible to participate. And those, as part of that mailing, participants were given the option to take a survey online, or they were given the option to just mail back the survey as part of that packet. And what you see is that roughly half, 528 chose to take it online, 507 chose to take it paper, but over 1,000 people did respond to the survey. And so that's a really good number. When you break that out across townships, what you see is the results. There's some slippage, but in general, the responses came back pretty consistent with what you'd expect from from certain communities. So I think that's again some good news. One of the things that I'll comment on throughout this presentation is how I see it, how the firm sees it. We do a lot of these surveys nationwide, whether they're capital surveys, whether they're in the context of strategic planning, whether they're in the context of climate, but soliciting input from communities. And I think we're in a unique position to add a little bit of context as to how we see these results and some of the things that are very predictable from our end of what we see over and over and over, but some of the things that aren't so predictable from our end that we don't see over and over. One of those areas is one, the overall quality of education. You ranked among the highest that we see. When you see these kinds of ratings, over 90% people rating the quality of education good or excellent. Those are high numbers. This is pretty much as high as it gets. It doesn't get any higher than that. And so I think you should feel really good about that. And what the message there is the community really values this place. The community believes in this place. The community believes that the students that are served by this district have a very high quality education. And so I think that is worth reiterating, and it goes to the great work of the board, the administration, and all the teachers, and everybody that makes that kind of education possible. The other thing that's not so typical of what we see is the consistency across groups. You're going to see a lot of disaggregation in that report. You're going to see a lot of statistical modeling trying to parse out how certain subgroups rated certain items and can predict the behavior of certain items based off of subgroups and demographics and those types of things. Far more consistent, the responses are far more homogeneous than we normally see, which again I think speaks to the unitedness of the community of really thinking that this place is a quality place. And so when you think of, when you look at that, 91% rating the overall quality of education as good or excellent, overall the overall experience being rated very high. If you look, it's in the report, if you look at the correlation between the two, those are really tightly tied. The community members really look at the overall student experience as one of those fundamental pieces that define quality. And so naturally you're going to see those tied together. As you move down the ranking, the quality of the facilities drops a little bit. Communication, unfortunately, communication is one of those things that in all of our surveys that we do, it's a hard one to get rated real high. You can communicate all you want. You can go door to door and have coffee with every single person in the community. It's just one of those that just tends not to get rated very highly. Similarly, when you ask parents about the quality of food in the cafeteria, certain things tend nationally not to get rated so high. Communication just happens to be one of them. But there's actually a lot of information within the report to suggest that all the communication that you're doing is really working and is manifesting itself in much better information. When you look at some of the disaggregation about where people get their information and how that manifests its overall ratings of quality and what they know about the district, I think there's really positive news in that those that you're reaching through your communications, you're doing a really good job communicating to. The problem is when you go to broader audiences, it's just harder to control that messaging, and it's harder to control that information. As we move down, communication, you mentioned communication, the management of the finances, a little bit lower. There is some, when you dig down into the open-ended comments that you'll see within in that report, there's a general feeling out there that's part of the history of what went on, and some of the capital expenditures, some of the administrative severance packages that have happened in the past. That is alive and well out there. So that's just that sentiment hasn't gone away. And so, but there is recognition that the management and finances has gotten a lot better. So that's really good, and you'll see that in the report. But there still is a little bit of that hanging over some of the things in the past. The overall quality of the Jefferson facilities didn't do too well. So there's awareness out there that facility is not on par with some of the other facilities from the district. And so that certainly validates the motivation for wanting to improve that facility. The other piece, when you look at the correlations, you'll see later in this presentation and within the report, there is a link between perceptions of facilities and perceptions of quality. So again, in some sense goes to the definition of quality, at least within the stakeholder groups. As part of the initial part of the survey that asked respondents to rate to some of these big picture items, some of the open-ended respondents that came back, a lack of information. That doesn't mean lack of communication. It means there was a lot of people that just, and this is common, community members that are broader based, that they probably don't have the detailed information that they might like. But that's not a positive or negative. It's just there's always need for more information. Perception of core facilities that go into the Jefferson campus, and some recognition, some variability around facilities. And I mentioned this idea of the perceptions of core financial management that's really rooted in some of the things that have happened in the past. So there is acknowledgement that the management environment is getting much better. Most of that comes from administrator severance management. So now I got to give you just a tiny statistic lesson with some of this. It's unfortunate. Statistics is rooted in probability theory. Probability theory is rooted in game theory. So now we're talking about gambling because that's just the vocabulary of statistics. But one of the things we talk about a lot in statistics are the odds of things happening. How much more likely is something to happen or not? And part of the analysis that we've done throughout this report is trying to link certain survey items to other survey items, so we can explain why variations in certain items vary the way that they do based off of observations of other items. And so what you see here are the ones that have come out significant. And the first one, rated. So what we're looking at here is what is the relationship? Can we predict the likelihood that someone's going to rate the quality of education as excellent based off of how they rated the overall student experience? So what you find here is if a person rates the overall experience excellent, they're 15 times more likely to rate the overall quality excellent than somebody else. So it gets to the tying together of some of these concepts. And you can see that is much more tightly tied to overall quality than anything else. And so this idea of providing a fantastic student experience, and as I was waiting for my turn to come up and present here, it's right in your mission to be student focused, and that is valued in your community. They want you to be student focused. They want you to be focused on the experiences of kids. And I think if you keep that center of mind, you're always going to be more aligned with the values of the community. But if you look at the rating of communication, those that rate communication highly are 2.5 times more likely to rate the quality as excellent. Those that rated facilities highly were over 2 times as likely to rate the quality as excellent. And so that's what we're looking at here. If those that rate finances highly are more likely to rate quality highly. So what the takeaway is of all this is how they define quality. This is how your stakeholders define the idea of quality. And so when you think about decisions that you make as a board of education, you have to tie into what this definition of quality is. There was kind of a side result here that those that had an affiliation with Washington actually worked the other way. And if you had an affiliation with Washington, you were less likely to rate the quality as excellent. And that's kind of a side result.
With Washington School? Is that what you mean?
With Washington School.
Okay.
Yeah, that's. So as we look to the priorities, one of the sections on the surveys was to rate the priorities that should be considered as the district plans for the future as to of greater importance and of lesser importance to stakeholders. And what you see here is a look at what clusters all the way at the top. Well, the items that are deemed by stakeholders to be the most important for the plan. It's all the students, it's all the student-focused stuff. It's the providing the safety and security of students. It's creating an appropriate learning environment. It's accommodating students with disabilities, having an innovative forward approach to education. It's the focus on the students. And so as you move down, one of the some of the least important priorities are things that have to do with flexibility of space and including open green spaces, some of the more physical aspects of buildings. And so the message here is whatever you do at the Jefferson facility has to keep students as the focal point of everything. And so as you make decisions about how to rebuild that campus or how to renovate that campus, you have to do it in a way that's going to tie to the overall student experience and it's going to make the learning environment better. This is something that we see over and over. This is not new to us. This is pretty predictable. When you go out and ask communities, they don't really care about facilities. They don't care about air conditioning. They don't care about bathrooms. They care about things that interfere with learning. And so you have to demonstrate that the changes or the renovations or the improvements are going to create a better environment for students and create a better environment for students to learn and ultimately succeed and raise the community by raising youth. So I think that's an important message. Whenever you do the facility projects, is not to focus on the facilities. To focus on the facilities as a way to augment student learning. Then we got into the concept selection. One of the parts of the survey presented respondents with some plausible scenarios that the board is considering and asked them to rate the feasibility. One was the new Jefferson Early Childhood Center as a standalone at the cost of $29.6 million. Concept 2, which would sell the Woodland facilities and consolidate some administrative space over at Woodland. Concept 3, the most costly option, would be to go from 3 facilities down to 2 through the combined Jefferson District offices, but some additional vehicle maintenance and storage, selling a facility, and also to address some of the other high priority maintenance pieces. So how did all that break out as far as responses? No surprise that the cheapest option prevailed. And so the message there, and there's other messages there that whatever you do, be prudent about the spend money that you have to, but don't spend money that you don't. And so concept 2 had 34%, concept 1, 27%, concept 3, and concept 3 was the most expensive option at $38.6 million, was the least desirable. In my opinion, how you interpret all of this, when you read the open-ended comments and you synthesize all of this together, it is the ones that chose a concept and the ones that didn't choose a concept, the way that we see it. Now, the ones that the largest majority chose concept 2, that was the lowest cost option. So there's definitely a message out there that we're interested in the lowest cost. However, concept 2 also included the consolidation of administrative offices, which nobody is in favor of. And I'm generalizing now, but the idea that the community isn't all that interested in the administrative space. What they're interested in is making conducive learning environments for students. And so if there's a way to take concept 2 and to make it more student-focused and to spend money more on students, and that I think will be, that'll manifest itself as more in line with the community's values than trying to deal with administrative space, unless it can be shown that it's a better investment, it's a better thing to do long-term, just because of the total picture of capital expenditures. The problem with all of these surveys is it's hard to get the total picture out. Right? It's hard for the broader audience to know all the multidimensional parts of the finances. And just given the previous presentation here of all your list of capital expenditures, depreciation, and selling, and capital refunds from the state, these aren't messages that get out. And so when you ask people, it's keep it focused on the students. So that's the message. And that's going to continue to be the message. When you break that down a little bit, you find that, since option 2 was the most favorable, are there any relationships that you're talking about as far as what kinds of people are likely to choose option 2? The longer that you're in the community, the more likely you were to choose option 2. Again, when you couple that with the qualitative comment, it's predominantly financially driven. If you had a Hubble middle school affiliation, you're more likely to support concept 2. And so some of the other ones that are a little bit more significant, if a child graduating from your district, you're more likely to choose concept 2, as well as if you're getting your information from District 200 publications. So this is one of those indications that those that are digesting the publications that are going out from the district, they see the logic in option 2. Kind of hard to see here. Most of these aren't significant, really. This is when you try to relate the priorities to the likelihood of choosing certain options. The most significant ones there are down on the bottom, but are really working in the opposite direction. And so if your odds ratio is under 1, that means you're moving in the other direction. And so, but there's really not a whole lot to take from that. There's a whole lot to take from the next analysis that really focuses on the ones that didn't choose any option. I think that's where a lot of, as I mentioned before, those that chose an option, those that didn't choose an option. When you break down the ones that did choose an option and offered some other option, or just commented that they don't like any of them and you shouldn't be doing anything, so if you rated the finances poorly of the district, remember there's all kinds of items that people rate. Those that rated the finances poorly were 3.3 times more likely to say no-go on any of them. Those that rated Jefferson facilities highly were twice as likely to say no-go on any of them. That makes sense because why renovate it if they don't need it, right? Those that rated communication poorly twice as likely to say no-go on any of them. Odds of concept selection by sources of information, those that indicated they get a lot of their information from the Board of Education meetings actually were 3 times as likely to not choose one of the options. This is not all that uncommon. It seems counterintuitive, but it's not. Because what ends up happening in a lot of communities is some of the most negative voices are the most informed from the sense of coming to board meetings and they're engaged, but they tend to be adversarially engaged. And so that doesn't surprise us all that much, because we see that. But the other piece of it is those that get their information from publications, they're more likely to have chosen twice. So that odds ratio is 0.5. That means they're twice as likely to have chosen one of the other options and not have chosen no option. And so if they're getting their information from publications, employees of the website, which is a closer connection to the district, those people are much more likely to have chosen one of those options. And if you pair up the choice of no option with priorities for the future, those that indicated that keeping initial capital facility costs as low as possible were almost 4 times is likely to not have chose an option and to have chosen the no option. And then having an innovative forward approach to education, those people were more likely to have chosen an option. Those that indicated provided for the safety and security of students, they were more likely to have chosen one of those options. And so I think there's messages in here that are important to pick up on. When asked to elaborate a little bit more on some of these ratings, some of the capital development concept selection, it's clear, and this isn't new to we. This is something we see over and over. Specifically in the last 3 to 5 years, is anything should prioritize academics have to be the center of everything. And so again, it's the same message up here. Whatever we do, we got to focus on the academics of things. Some general comments about we just need to be spending less, and include the transition program in Jefferson plans. That was some of the things that came up as well. And so where do people get their information? That differs a little bit by parent and community, but you can see the chart without going through every single item on the chart, where people get their information. So if you take all of this and you summarize it all, so what's the main messages here when you take all of it is, the first is definitely that stakeholders rate the overall quality of education very high. You have a very engaged community, and you have a community that really values this place, and you have a community that believes this place provides the highest quality of education. And so I think that's great. However, there is some room for improvement in stakeholder perception of overall financial management. However, there's acknowledgement that it's getting better. Again, when you try to break that up, a lot of that has to do with some of the things that have happened historically or isolated events in the past, but that are still hanging out there. So just to be aware of that. Priorities for the future, they'd like to see the district prioritize instructional expenditures over facility-related expenditures. Again, it's not to say that there's no support for facilities, because there is, but you got to make the link to supporting learning, better learning environments for kids, removing barriers to learning, providing for better opportunities for students to excel and lift this community along the way. Those are the kinds of messages that I think are in line with people's values. There is support for renovations at Jefferson, provided, again, it's student-centered, focuses on student experiences. It's the same thing over and over and over again. However, there is lack of support for renovations for administrative spaces. And so, don't shoot the messenger, that's just what's out there. So, but that's it for the formal presentation. Happy to take any questions. Stuff that I presented or stuff that you found in the report.
Questions for Mr. Gott from the board? I do have some things I want to point out, but I certainly want to make sure the board members get opportunities to ask questions about the information. Yes.
Yeah, is somebody else speaking right now, or?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I don't have so much questions as I just have a few observations based on it, and I guess I wanted to check and see whether my thinking is right, according to what they might interpret the results. First and foremost, it impressed me that the community has reaffirmed that their main interest is in highly qualified teachers. That was something that we heard in focus groups a number of years ago, and that I think we've kind of, used as a guide as a board, but it's kind of nice to see it reaffirmed here, because that seems to be what the community says they would like their money spent on mostly. Secondly, it seems to me like we can't over-communicate. It's impossible for us to over-communicate about the district in general, but really in particular about the program at Jefferson and how it relates to student needs. That I'm thinking seems to be a key here. And then maybe slightly less important, I was interested in a piece of information that Board of Education meetings provided not the best source of information for people, and that we're kind of right to have established that goal of enhancing meeting communications with stakeholders. So I guess, those are some of my takeaways from that. I was a little surprised about the low priority of green space and community use and that kind of thing. I guess I would have intuitively thought that would have been more important to the community than it was in the list of priorities, so that was kind of interesting to me. And lastly, I guess I don't really know what to do with all of these specific school-related, likely to support, less likely. I'm not quite sure where we go with those very specific pieces of information, like for Washington Elementary School or Hubble Middle School and so forth.
So I can make a few comments on that. One is, don't interpret that finding that those that mention they get their information from Board of Education meetings as being less likely, as choosing to, that the board isn't doing a good job communicating. You cannot make that interpretation, you cannot make that link. Surveys, just the nature of what they are, is those are just people that, for whatever reason, show up to board meetings more often. They are more well informed, and oftentimes that leads to very specific positions on there. So I have to make sure that you don't interpret the result that the Board of Education is doing a good job communicating, because that's not what that finding is going to represent at all. The second piece is, I agree with you that I wouldn't do, it goes back to my comment up front, is be really careful about taking isolated pieces of data that don't fit the story and make it a big deal out of them. And you do surveys, and just probability theory alone, you're going to find stuff. Like, that's just how statistics works. And so that's why, as statisticians, we're always guarded, and part of formal training is be careful about fishing around the data and doing all kinds of analysis, because you're going to find all kinds of interesting things that really don't mean anything and may not even exist. And so that's why you got to focus on the triangulating pieces and really focusing on the pieces that have coalesced across multiple items that synthesize together to tell a story. So that's the other piece of it. But I would reaffirm that there is a message that stay focused on instruction. And that's a message we hear over and over and over again. Community over community over community over community is we're here to educate kids. Our primary mission is to grow kids. So we should do our best to allocate dollars towards kids. And it's pretty much that simple.
I do think also, Mrs. Swanson, you did reference the high-quality teaching. That is embedded in the report. I had emailed before the meeting copies of the report that you all have here this evening, and in that report, there is references to the significant importance of high-quality teachers in the district, and talking about a priority to spend the dollars in the classrooms. And again, it goes back to that same theme. So I think that's what you were referencing correctly, Mrs. Swanson?
Correct.
Okay. Did Mr. Goddard, were you able to hear a lot of his responses there?
No, and in fact, if you want to talk about enhanced board communications, I would say that that's listening on speakerphone, that may be part of the problem.
You're absolutely right. Let me just summarize what he said. But basically, he did say that don't spend a lot of time looking at small pieces of the data to try and interpret it. Stay focused on the big message that have been triangulated.
Okay.
Okay, you referenced a couple pieces of isolated things there. He said I would basically stay focused on the big picture messages about focusing on student needs and dollars directed to the classroom. Okay. Mr. Johnson, any questions while we're on the speakerphone here?
No, I heard most of what you were saying, and I got the report, so I will give that, probably get questions back later.
Okay, great.
I just had a question, because the only difference between concept 2 and 3 is the capital improvements on other parts of our building. Isn't that what the difference was? That we were putting other building improvements in, right? Was that, like, do you think the only reason they said 2 is because it's the cheapest, right? They didn't even care or think maybe too much about the difference between 2 and 3 as enhancing the other building?
My synthesis of it is they're provided with options, exactly what you said, 2 of which look a whole lot the same, except this other one's got all these other improvements to it that I don't see a connection to how they're helping kids directly, and given the economic conditions and some of the other kinds of facilities that enhancements that are happening, this seems like a more prudent choice right now. And so I think it is that simple. It's the dollars.
embedded in the report, Joanne, to answer your question, and again, you'll have time to read the entire report, it's 40 pages or so on. There is some reference to using current dollars, the O&M fund, to pay for those renovations or those facility needs that are listed as capital improvements. They're basically saying, take the dollars that you got and make it work. That, he said that, I'm paraphrasing exactly like that.
I would agree with that, absolutely.
So that, in reference to those things, that's what comes out in the detail. In the report, you'll see it in there as an isolated item that's listed. So at this point, I think the understanding is the need for the facility at Jefferson is clear. However, these other pieces, use what you have and make it work. Is that correct?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and on that point, when we talk about improving our facility, improving the facilities district-wide, that's a very complicated message to send. If anybody has seen the spreadsheet we have on prioritizing our facilities needs, then it's just almost too much to comprehend. It's almost too much to comprehend for me, let alone people who are not responsible for doing this work. So it's understandable, I think, that people understand the need for New Jefferson and focus our effort on that rather than this kind of ambiguous larger picture that was presented in Concept 3.
I think a couple of this, and we'll get into more detail on this, some of our strategies we started to look at is to take a look at energy-related things and options and how can we pay for things that we know are capital needs in different ways and try to be creative and innovative about how we go about those things. I think that's going to continue to be a priority for us as we move forward, especially in relation to those isolated items. And I think that's certainly going to be a point of discussion when we move away from Jefferson at some point down the road. You know, how are we going to continue to and reorganize and reprioritize some of those needs? One of the very visible things that wasn't listed there, I know Mr. Farley was just with the contractors the last week, was the two athletic fields of both high schools. They run their life. And, you know, that is a very pressing need that is out there, and we're going to have to do something about that soon. Now, that's an isolated item, but it is an example of something that, you know, we're going to have to pay attention to here in the very near future, and looking at making sure those types of things get dealt with appropriately and don't get beyond repair, and then we have other issues in our hands. So that's just an example of something that is going to have to get addressed in the near future. And when we have that list that we put together, we may have to reprioritize those things based with the dollars we have available in some of those immediate capital needs that are in the district. Any other questions in regard to some of the data?
Thank you for the report. I think it's well put together. My concern is based on your industry and the sampling technique. You know, we got 1,000 responses back from well over the mid 30,000 that went out in our mailing at the time they went out. A, would you address the response that we got from our community based on numbers? Is that typical in the industry? Were we high? Were we low? Were we average? Based on the sample that went out, and then also what element of reliability do you place upon only 1,000 back based on the total number that went out?
So I'll answer that a couple of different ways.
Okay.
The first is, yes, the response rate for broader communities is typical of what we see for broader-based kinds of surveys like this. It's a little bit counterintuitive when you deal with the statistics of things, that it's the sheer number that matters way more than the proportion that actually came back. If you think about national polls that run, just as an example, that extrapolate to 300 million Americans, those are based off of 1,000, 1,500 people. And so the idea is that the sheer number is far, far more important than what percentage of the population that we actually talk with. So that's the first thing, because 1,000 is a good number. 1,000 is a really good number. The second piece, though, gets to the representativeness of that 1,000. And we do checks to look at the representative of that 1,000, but that's also why we do statistical modeling so that we account for that and adjust for that, any imbalances that there are. And so through that, 1,000 is a very good number. Your general characteristics are consistent. through the statistical model that showed the sample is pretty homogeneous as it relates to some of the variations across demographics, I feel very confident that number's a great number, and that reflects the broader community.
I think also, Ken, if you have an opportunity to read the report, about pages 7 or 8 in here, there's a statistical breakdown, basically what you just explained. It's written in stats language, I would say, and to really think hard when I was reading some of this stuff, but it does explain why the numbers here are valid and reliable. It's the way I read it. Is that correct?
Ken, thanks for answering those questions, because I had those highlighted as well. I do have a couple more. On figure 6, and clearly there's a lot of data here, but figure 6, that pie chart, talking about the length of residency in the district, I find that intriguing, and on the respondents. And more importantly, I was wondering if you can tie back those respondents to figure 20, which was the breakout of the concept solution or a selection. Is there any way to tie back were the people who've been here 20 years or more, who are 41% of the respondents, did they fall in the other category, or where do you think they fell? Or is there any way to measure that? Or did I not ask the right question?
Right, you absolutely asked the right question, and there's always more data to be had if you can disaggregate ad infinitum, because if there's a number of ways you can slice this. But it's also why we do the statistical modeling piece. If you look at I think it's page 20, which goes at some of the results of the statistical modeling. Length of residency, which is what is listed on page 8, did have a relationship to concept 2 selection. And so if we look at that, it's actually on page 21. The odds of concept 2 selection by length of residency. And so those that have been in the community longer are more likely to choose option 2. That is, you can see that by that odds ratio of 1.3. The longer you're in the community, the odds of you choosing concept 2 are 1.3 times greater than so that's how we tie it back. We tie it back with those models and talk about the likelihood of rating certain items favorably or not favorably, or choosing certain options or not choosing certain options based off the other variables. The reason why we statistically model it and we don't just disaggregate it is because when we do surveys, there's all kinds of tolerances, right? All these variables interrelate with all these other variables. And so modeling helps to put everything on a fair playing field.
Thank you. One other question on figure 20, the other category. I mean, that's 25% of the folks said other. Was that quantified? Does that other mean lesser cost? I don't want any building at all. Was there a breakout somewhere in here that I've just not seen as it relates to what does the other category mean? It's all encompassing. They didn't pick 1, 2, or 3, and therefore they just dropped into that. But was there any detail about why they dropped into that category? Because there's 25% of the respondents in that category.
Sure. The survey instrument itself, the option said other. I prefer an option not listed. So it was just a box to say I don't like any of the options. Please, I like a different option. So then tell us what option that is. I can tell you right now that number, that 24%. I'll try to speak louder here. The number, that 24%, which is a big number. Those are the people that are not in favor of anything. I can tell you that. Those are the people. When you look at the relationship of some of the analysis that we've done, of looking at priorities and how that relates to other variables, that 25% is not in favor of doing anything. That 25% are the ones that are probably not going to want to move on anything. And I think that's pretty clear.
Other questions? I know board members haven't had a chance to get into the details of the instrument here, and I know we'll have more opportunity for that, at a future meeting here in the very near future. Any other questions about the information that was presented here this evening? Especially about, hold on a second, Amy. Okay, go ahead.
just a related question. What's the timing for having to make a decision on the referendum again?
We targeted the January 9th board meeting as the date and when we do need to make a decision to be able to get a question on the April ballot. So obviously we need to decide from there how much time we're going to need at the board table here, looking through this information, looking at different scenarios for the site, as well as the financing options that we would recommend and propose if we did decide to move forward with a proposal. Does that make sense?
One more question, kind of backpedaling again on that 25%. Was there any breakdown on, it boiled down to, they said no because they thought their taxes would go up? Did that come out at all?
It came out through the it came out through the relationship to what they indicated as priorities, and though it's those, the ones that chose no option are the ones that said they want to keep costs as low as possible. They want to focus on renovations, not big capital expenditures, open-ended comments that we just need to live within our means. All of those comments that are predominantly just financially driven. So, I think it's safe to say that those are the real fiscal conservatives that don't want to see a lot of money.
Joanne, to answer your specific question, if you go to page 24 at the bottom, and Jim, this kind of gets to your question as well. Page 24 at the bottom, the zero cost option, and it says right there, if you read that couple sentences, it explains exactly what we just got done talking about. There was, people who picked that in that piece of it, the 24%, basically said they can't afford to spend one more nickel, don't do anything.
So that would be very, and can we estimate how much our taxes would go up?
Yeah, we've got, the Finance Committee has looked at several different options, and certainly, you'll hear a little bit on the report here this evening, but we've got a lot of detail prepared to move forward depending on the scope of what the project is, and I know those got to go hand in hand. It depends on the number, depends on how much you want to spend and what the size of the project is, and then how it would impact taxpayers. So yes, we have all the information. It's just a matter of trying to balance the needs of the facility and the student needs there, as well as of what the taxpayers are willing and are able to pay.
So that would be the big message, probably would, because I would anticipate it's not going to be a lot, but that would be huge marketing fees we've got.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, I know that Rosemary's proposed that we have some interim board meetings to discuss this focus on Jefferson between now and January 9th. If we have additional questions about the ECHO report that we did raise at those meetings or sessions we have, can those questions then be conveyed to Mr. Godwin and staff and get answers either through phone conversations between staff and ECHO?
Yeah, absolutely. I would work those through Brian, and Brian will work through us. We'll get you answers very expeditiously if we have any questions.
Absolutely. If you have the time to read the entire report, if you want to send those questions to me, I will get them to him. You just send them directly to me. What I'll do then is I'll put together a comprehensive list for the entire board to take a look at to make sure we don't continue to double do the questions, and so everybody will have that information, and we certainly then can share that out in our next conversation as well.
And I would ask, I think this is appropriate also to copy each other on your questions so that we're not putting Brian in a position where he's got to sit through 50 questions that really should be 10. So let's copy each other so that we know what each other has asked and, do it all kind of organized, that way. Okay.
And then we'll share a comprehensive summary of that, at our next meeting, so everybody's got the information. Certainly want to make sure the public stays in tune with what your questions are and comments, because that's going to drive some of the decision making. There's no doubt.
I've got one more final question. I realize you dealt only in the data and the statistics, and you looked at our community through the eyes of 1,000 people. Based on the reliability and all of that, would you go for a referendum? And
So one thing I've
I looked into it, but I'm just curious as to when you turn these statistics over in this manner, give us, your viewpoint on whether or not the reliability of going for a referendum based on a dollar amount, within the low range would be successful.
One thing that I've learned, and I think we've all learned through elections, is it's very difficult to predict what people do when they go into that voting. All the money spent on very, very sophisticated, as sophisticated as you could possibly get at the national level, trying to poll and do all these. Yeah, they do okay, but they're never perfect, because when people get into that voting booth, you can ask people all the questions you want. Would you support this? Would you support that? I love this. I love that. I love that. But they didn't know. And it's just, that's one of the things that make this whole process difficult. That's why you want to focus on tying into the values. What do they value? What are their hearts? What are their minds? What are the things that they really believe in? And if you stick to that, you're definitely going to have the highest likelihood of pushing, moving something forward. It would really be the glass ball trying to say, can you pass it or not? I think there's support out there.
No, I'm not asking whether you pass it or not. Would you recommend that we go for it based on the data that you've seen?
In all fairness, it has to be balanced with all of the other considerations of the district. I'm not privy to the deep financial, where is the district financially on a deeper level? Where are the status of larger capital expenditures? What's on that list from the first presentation of capital expenditures and depreciation and all of these? It's got to be thought of in a total context. I'm speaking from one perspective, but there are other perspectives that have to be at the table before I think you can get it right.
Let me rephrase this, maybe to get at what Ken's asking. Based on the information, right here, that's up on the screen, the summary of findings, if we choose to move forward with a project that eliminates the administrative spaces, cuts the price of the facility down, gets it down, still clearly meets the needs of the students, and it's clearly articulated, that type of a referendum would be successful.
I think you had a good shot at that.
Okay. I'm just cutting right to it based on as I've listened, what are some of the decision points we're going to have here. It's about, narrowing it down and getting it to a point that we believe the majority of the community is going to support.
And it's about how effectively you educate the community.
Correct.
How it's going to augment student learning. If it resonates as more buildings, it's tough. If it resonates as this augments student learning, it removes barriers to learning, it helps lift the whole community through this. We need all of those messages that are aligned with values. I think they're a really good shot.
If I understand what you're saying correctly, if we put strictly educational spaces on a referendum question, the likelihood that it will pass is fairly high. If we start adding in administrative spaces, even at a small amount, that drops down.
That's not all.
And so then everything that we add in will drop it down, the likelihood further and further. And the best we could hope for, if I read this pie chart right, is about 76%, which obviously is an overwhelming passage. But when you think about, the concept 3 people might say, well, no, or the concept 1 people might say, well, they should have renovated. You're going to lose that whole, that whole contingency as well. So if you look at, some combination of concept 1 and 3 is being able to pass, you've got fairly, so you have a relatively small group from which to then choose. So it just seems to me that that's pointing to, just looking at the pie chart, the pure educational spaces is the way to go. And it's incumbent upon us, if on down the road, we really want and feel the need, which we do now, to renovate or build new administrative spaces, then we need to make the case very clearly to the community how those spaces support education as well. And that's the case we need to make.
Absolutely, and part of it is being able to communicate that. And that's the big thing. How do you get those messages out? The more complicated the scenarios are, the much more difficult to market that about what the value is. If you keep it narrow, if you keep it targeted, aligned to the values, you can educate people to a point that they're going to see them.
In dealing with an early childhood center, we're dealing with spaces that are closely aligned with the quality of instruction. And what we have now is a facility and space that's not aligned with the quality of instruction that we know we're mandated to provide for these kids that show up at age 3 to take advantage of the state directives. So, in a lot of respects, in this survey, we talked a lot about the quality of education as being a very high priority, and Rosemary even commented on that of focus forums that took place 10, 12 years ago that I was a part of as well. That is very high quality, but the building that houses these special needs children is not the proper facility for us, and there is a close resemblance. And in our marketing, we've got to come out with a place and a way to share those kinds of things so that the public is aware that the spaces we're using are not adequately providing the quality of education that we know is needed for these kids. So, that's an important piece for the marketing aspect of it, and rather than talk just about spaces and counting chairs, and we've done that route years ago, but the spaces is very important for the instructional learning. And the reason for this being the last school we're dealing with and so on, it's important that we focus right now.
But I think you're exactly right. You have to somehow get out the message of the importance of early childhood education, specifically for those that are at risk or have disabilities, and the inadequacy of the current facilities to be able to do that, and that renovating those facilities will provide the opportunity for these kids to get the critical information they need at a critical developmental point, so that they can matriculate through the system into the community and be productive citizens, whether they're college ready or anything goes along with that. So that's somehow you got to get that message coalesced and condensed, and then I think you got a good shot.
One of the other items, and Rosemary, you mentioned this in your initial comments, was the green space and some of those other nice to haves. The reason why there was an indirect motion there, from what I could see, is because of the price. That stuff costs more. Green space costs more. LEED certified things, they cost more. Now, are they the right thing to do environmentally? That's always the case. However, there is a cost point there. That's why there was and from what I can gather in this, and John, you can confirm that, that's why you saw those things lower down in that list, was because there's a price tag to it.
Absolutely. They just see those as more dollar signs. And if they're going to prioritize, it just keeps going back to student center, student center, student center.
Does that make sense, Rosemary? Yeah.
Any other?
Okay, I just want to summarize a couple things here before we close out this discussion. The committee work, which we'll hear reports on in a minute, the Jefferson Core team, which includes Mr. Broman, has been meeting off and on over several months, and we have started to look at facilities that would eliminate the administrative spaces and really consolidate that footprint. So if we do discuss having a special board meeting here in the next week or two, I know that committee and the architects are prepared to move forward to show some of those modified scenarios. One other thing, the Finance Committee, which we'll hear again this evening, Mrs. Swanson and Mr. Biabiani have been part of those discussions. We have been working with PMA, looking at different financing scenarios. In other words, what's it going to cost the taxpayer? If it's $40 million, here's what it costs. If it's 30 million, here's what it costs. If it's 15 million, here's what it costs, whatever it is. And then, we've broken down everything, and we've got that information prepared for the board to learn about and to make some decisions on as we look at the different facilities. So I do think we have a lot of work in front of us here over the next month and a half prior to January 9th in relation to Mr. Johnson's question. And I would encourage the board to consider scheduling a couple special board meetings. We have our regular board meeting, we certainly can discuss in December, but I do believe we're going to need additional time prior to January 9th to be able to make an informed decision. We also, you probably will have some additional questions based on the information you see here as well. Any comments on that before I let Mr. Agata move from the podium before we move forward in relation to those things?
Just want to say thank you for all of your hard work and your insight that you're providing in addition to all the valuable information, because I think it's important that we hear your interpretation as a professional statistician, how to make the data into information. So you've been very valuable to us. Thank you for coming tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a written report on Freedom of Information Act requests. Reports from board members. Facilities Committee, can we hear from you first? Facilities and Capital Development.
Sure. I think our last committee of the whole meeting pretty well covered where we are on facilities and so on, and had a number of presentations that talked in great detail about where we ought to be and how we ought to move ahead with our performance contracting and so on, and given some margin orders, I think, for the spring for that to take place. So I think we're pretty well caught up to speed. Any comments on that?
No, I just should just be on Jefferson Court. The Jefferson Court Committee also met last week, as Brian alluded to, subcommittee of the Facilities Committee. We met with the architects. Brian was there, Bill was there, Stephanie, I know I'm missing some others as well. And we directed the architects to come up with 2 conceptual plans for the Jefferson site that do eliminate the administration offices, that focus only on a Jefferson Early Childhood Learning Center. And also, the architects did take into consideration the concerns of the neighbors for some more green space. At the same time, be conscious of the costs involved. And we're hopeful that they will have those conceptual presentations ready for us at perhaps the next interim board meeting we may schedule here. And I'm encouraged by at least their responsiveness to not only what we heard at the forums held at Jefferson, but the preliminary report Brian gave on the ECHO report that we heard tonight. And so I was encouraged by what I heard and saw.
Thank you, Mr. Knicker. Mr. Felder.
Can I just ask a question? When we're discussing whether to have an administrative building part of it, is the balance also, the reason that that building being so old and worrying about that lower level with the technology and everything, there is a cost and so is that being weighed in everything? And we have to relay that information, but that's a big deal.
You are absolutely correct, Mrs. Coghill. That need for our facilities and maintenance, as well as the current building on Park Avenue, needs attention. It's going to have to get, because it's going to get to a point real soon where it's going to fall apart. And, that's not a wise decision by anybody. So I think what we're going to have to do as a board is we think about what we go out to the community ask for Jefferson, we may have to use other resources, as they indicated in the survey, to meet those facility needs. We do have some capital development dollars, but we have a long list, as everybody knows, of issues and where we prioritize those things. We're going to have to take it a step at a time, and I do believe those district facilities are going to have to play into this. There's no doubt about it. What we're going to do at Woodland. Woodland's another site that has had had little to no attention for 30 years. And it's essentially a warehouse at this point and a few office spaces for our facilities and maintenance. But the roof over there is beyond repair. I mean, it's not good. And we can't ignore it. Now, it may be a separate discussion away from the Jefferson site, and they'd probably be incorporated with all these other needs, as I referenced, like the athletic field, the football fields at both high schools, like, the roofs and some of the parking lots at some of our sites, like at South and at Johnson, and some of our sites where the parking lots are like gravel. We need to replace those. They're critical. They're immediate needs that are listed. That's where we have to start trying to make some decisions with the dollars we have available to us. And it's going to be tough. But the community was clear, at least in November or in October of 2012, what they would support, what they wouldn't support. So I think it's, our decision moving forward how we choose to do it.
Is there a report from the legal RFQ committee?
Yes, next week, the RFQ will go out to over 20 law firms, I believe. The RFQ is a product of the committee's work on reviewing not only the RFQ and making sure it was comprehensive in all respects, and I think it was an excellent job that Lisa Mayer did on that. But also we worked on a list of questions we could pose when we do have law firms who come back, respond to the RFQ, and are invited to meet with us. And we'll continue to work on those questions and enhance them. But I'm encouraged by what I saw with respect to the RFQ and the input that a number of people had in it. And I forgot how long we've given the law firms to respond when it goes out. Is it 60 days?
It's due back the 21st of December, and it went out actually Monday.
Oh, it did go out Monday. Okay, so they'll have approximately 30 days to respond, 35 days. But Ken?
I will send a copy of that. It's posted on our website, but I'll send a copy to board members, for your reference. It's pretty clear, and it's very detailed about the needs and legal needs that we have as a board and the district. So I will make sure everybody gets a copy of that. And it is posted on our website.
Finance committee.
Thank you. Yeah, we met on the 26th of October, and there were three key topics that were addressed that day. Capital funding options for the Jefferson Early Child Learning Center, the audit, which everyone here tonight heard a presentation on, and then the levy. You have a copy of that in your green folder, and Mr. Farley will bring that to the December 12th board meeting. Interestingly enough, all three topics are interrelated, and I'm not going to get into the details of that because it's not that it's complicated. There are just many scenarios that we're reviewing, and most of those scenarios are going to unfold based on further analysis of the ECHO report. So, as the Finance Committee move forward, we have, to Dr. Harris's point, continue to peel back the onion, so to speak, and look at various options for funding relative to the audit report, which said heads up on the pension system, pension plans maybe being handed down to the districts, the levy that's forthcoming, the referendum that we're trying to give consideration to. So all I can suggest or state at this point in time is the Finance Committee stays on top of it with staff. We're exploring all options, and each of those will get tightened down, if you will, relative to further analysis of the ECHO report.
Rosemary, anything you'd like to add?
No, that was an excellent summary.
Thank you, Mr. Gambiani. I just want to say that we are going to meet with the Learning and Teaching Committee on Monday, about the 26th, to talk about elementary report card and how it will relate to Common Core. So Faith and members of her committee have done, I guess, a lot of background work on this, and we'll be reviewing some ideas they have with us, and we'll report at the December board meeting, and we'll give our committee report then.
The only other comment I have is we will pull board members on a special board meeting coming up and try to schedule that. I do need to check with the architects and to see when they would have things, appropriate to present, to start to look at different options. I do believe we do need to have at least spend some time discussing any further questions about the survey data here that we have, and we'll double check with them to make sure they're available. So we will poll all of you whenever we do have the verification that they'll be available to provide the appropriate information. Does that sound good for that? The board meetings. We are targeting, just for the community's information, we will be targeting Wednesday nights, try to stay on Wednesday nights. Might be meeting every Wednesday night between now and January 9th to try and focus our decision. So that is our target. It won't be next Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, but after that, we will be looking at each of those Wednesday nights.
So that following Wednesday night would be November 28th, so it probably would be good to kind of reserve that, at least at this point in time.
I do want to verify with the architects prior to scheduling that time, because I'd like to try and cover a couple topics each time we get together.
Are there any other reports from board members? I have a couple of things I wanted to report on. As you all know, this weekend is the Illinois Association of School Boards Convention in downtown Chicago, and I believe a number of us are planning to attend, and we should be hearing more about the elephant in the room, the pension issue, and how that may affect our district finances going forward. So it's very important that we attend and make our voice be heard, as well as learn all that we can about the changing environment and the education here in Illinois. Thank you to the PTA Council for a fabulous breakfast this morning. Every year they have a wonderful event where we all come together and kind of mingle in the room and have coffee and we're able to thank each other for the way we work together to educate the students. So thank you again. That's always a nice activity. And one other thing I wanted to mention, you may have all received an email from the National School Board Association. That convention is coming up in April. We do have in our budget money for 3 board members to go if they choose. So if you are interested, you may let Dr. Harris know. And then if there, I don't think there would be more than 3 of us, given that it's 2 days after the election. So with 4 of us up, so I don't know if anyone who was up for, whose seat is up would be really wanting to make a plan to go to the convention, but if anybody would like to, let Dr. Harris know and we'll work that out. Anything else? Okay, we have topics for future discussion. Again, a discussion of the ECRA report on the Jefferson Facilities Capital Development. That will be ongoing, as we just talked about, and maybe the topic for special meetings. The 2013 levy will be a topic at the December 12th meeting. Are there any announcements? Okay, our next regular meeting will be December 12th at Lowell Elementary School. Are there any public comments on non-agenda items? There are none. Okay, we do have a need for closed session tonight, and the closed session items that are going to be discussed are purchase or lease of real property.
He'd like to speak, but there's, I think he'd
I'd
like to
like to
speak.
comment if I have a chance.
Okay.
Hi. My name is Mike Swark. I'm a registered financial advisor. I taught high school mathematics for 31 years. Been an advisor for 20 years. Is it on?
Yes, you need to right by your mouth, sir.
Thank you. This is what I know, and it may seem disjoint from what was going on today. Bear with me for a couple of minutes. I'll bring my points to an edge at the end. About 3 or 4 years ago, the Treasury Department said there has to be a new regulation, regulatory advisories for 403Bs. These are supplemental retirement programs for not-for-profit organizations. we were in on a bid, and we can get to, I can drill down as far as you want, but the Securities and Exchange Commission and FINRA, Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, says there's only one way to compare things. That's if you take $10,000, you extrapolate it over 5% compounded for 10 years, it goes to $16,288. What are your costs? Our internal costs and external costs were $1,200 to $1,800. Some of our competitors were $3,500 to $4,500. We didn't make the plan. It was fine. It was your plan. It's exactly right. But when I ask questions about why we didn't do it, Wheaton resident, why we didn't make it, all I got was this from administrators and union members. And I couldn't get an answer. And again, it was your plan, so you could do what you wanted with it. But I said we could have saved up over 140 people from the supplemental plans. We're going direct to two different funds. I won't name the funds. Two. They were on our platform. All the breakpoints, all the discounts, all the loads, all the non-runs, they were all going to stay as they were. And we could have saved 144 people, but the union said no, and I asked again, why? We had the union's blessing, we had the union's plan, the state's plan, and we also offered a 529. He hired a third-party administrator, and the third-party administrator was one of the funds that you chose to retain. So I thought there was a little conflict of interest there. The third-party administrator would not indemnify you for some of the transfers. So you had a court sign off on it. That was a big risk. No Series 6, no Series 7, no Series 63, no Series 65, I don't know about insurance, licensing, but they had someone there that could have blown up this plan, and it would have been a liability for everybody in the district. If the Treasury Department had found a problem, they didn't. But again, I asked why, I just couldn't get an answer. Please, don't take this wrong. There was something like the number of people who asked last year about the superintendent's remuneration and about his plan. We couldn't get an answer. Some of the people in the community were upset by this. We looked at that last, or one of the slides, 50% of the people are upset about the finances. Maybe upset is a strong word, but they're concerned about the finances of the district. And the gentleman that was here from the accounting firm, he had told us about you also alluded to the pension liability. When I look at this last brochure, and there's $115,000 in salaries and benefits, I am just guessing. I'm thinking $115 million. $15 million maybe benefits, it's $100,000. $15 million maybe benefits, that's $100 million in salaries. And the teachers paying 9.75% on that. And Speaker Madigan now says you have to take over the states. Can you afford 6, 7, 8? I don't know if I'm right or not, Mr. Farley, but can you afford 6, 7, $8 million and then Bill Jefferson besides? I would think you want to really give this some strong thoughts. You're already pushing a bloated program with a 6% salary boost to current retirees over the last 4 years. That boosts their salary with 2.2 to about 120% of what they get if it wouldn't be. If that's the case, it's already a bloated program that's not funded. It's going to be exceedingly more bloated. TRS is going to explode. On a personal point, I'm a member of a group that stretches and gives physical therapy to a quadriplegic in town. I see a small part of what those parents go through. And I realize we have to do it for kids too. But I was really taken back when I saw the last presentation and I heard violin music in the background. Violin music really should be for all the taxpayers, the tax and my clients that I meet in this district. They can't afford it. It's tough. You know how hot it was this summer? You want to put air conditioning to Jefferson? I had clients that did not turn their air conditioner on all summer. Or turn them on Friday night, close all the blinds, try to live comfortably for a couple of days, and then turn it back on. You can't afford it. I'm sure you've heard all the stories. Taxes on their properties, the ones I'm involved with. It's going to go higher and higher and higher, and the steeper man gets his way, it's even be more destroyed. I gave this information to Dr. Harris at a meeting prior to this, and he said he'd look into this. And I thought, just like last time, I'll give him my money. Well, Dr. Harris called me, and I applied for it. But he told me the exact opposite information of what I said back to my own original data. That's what I wonder, do you really act on data? Because our plan, you can call it sour grapes, was a third to a half of what everybody else's was. You saved 144 people. We pure funds, and we also used the police. But Dr. Harris said, you didn't have enough capability. Yours wasn't wide enough, didn't stretch enough. We were literally 50 to 60 times more capability than some of the other plans, but we were rejected. But he still came up with this. It's not his fault, it's what came back. So I'm wondering about the influence of data that comes in. Does it go in one way and come out another way?
Can you, excuse me, your 3 minutes are up now. Can you just kind of bring the closure? I'm sorry.
That was it. Okay. That was it. I thank you for your time. I think you should really give some strong consideration to finances of people for this district. Thank you for your time.
Okay, is there a motion on the floor to move to closed session?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Roman, seconded by Mr. Knicker. Mrs. Sender, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Knicker?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson? Mrs. Swanson? Mr. Galiano?
Yes, and I apologize. I shut my system down, so can you vote for me, please?
Okay. Mrs. Pacquiao?
Yes.
Mrs. Intihar?
Yes. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Rosemary, we'll call you.